You ever have a person who feels like the anchor to your whole world? For me, that was my grandma Ilara. My world for a long time was a pretty stormy place. My dad took off before I could form a memory of him, and my mom, well, she tried. But she fought her demons louder than she could ever love me. Her demons usually came in a bottle, but Grandma's house, that was my sanctuary. It smelled like lemon polish, rising bread, and the rich, earthy scent of the oil paints she used in her studio upstairs. She was an artist, not a famous one, but a real one. She taught me that beauty isn't something you just find. It's something you make, you pull out of the chaos with your own two hands. I remember sitting on a stool in her studio, the summer sun cutting through the dust motes dancing in the air. I was maybe 10. She was working on a landscape, all greens and golds. "See, Liam," she'd say, her voice like warm gravel. "You don't just paint the tree. You paint the light holding the tree. You paint the space around it. That's where the truth is." She'd hand me a brush, a cheap one, and let me make my own messy attempts on a scrap of canvas. She never criticized. She'd just nod and say, "Interesting perspective." She made me feel like my chaos had value. She was my biggest cheerleader. When I decided to go to trade school to be a welder instead of a 4-year college, my mom scoffed. "A laborer, really, Liam? Is that all you're worth?" "But Grandma," she took me out for a milkshake. "A creator," she corrected me, her eyes twinkling. "You're going to build things, to make bones for the world. There's more honor in a single honest well than in a lifetime of pushing paper for a soul-crushing corporation." She believed in me. She saw a future for me where I was respected, skilled, and proud. I held on to that belief like a lifeline. It was the foundation everything was built on. After trade school, I got a good job. It was hard, dirty work, but I was good at it. I loved the transformation of it, taking raw, ugly steel and turning it into something structured, something with purpose. The hiss of the torch, the spark shower of creation. It was my version of her paintbrush. I rented a small apartment, bought a beat-up truck, and for the first time I felt like a man Grandma could be proud of. I visited her every Sunday without fail. We'd have dinner, and I'd tell her about my projects, the new bridge, the framework for a downtown high-rise. Her eyes would shine with genuine interest. She'd tell me about the art history book she was reading, or the new technique she was trying. We were two different kinds of artists, speaking the same language of creation. I thought our bond was unbreakable, a fortress. I thought she saw me, the real me, clearer than anyone ever had or would. The first crack appeared on a perfectly ordinary Sunday. I'd just finished a massive overtime project, and I was tired but flush with cash. I brought over her favorite lasagna and a new set of sable brushes I'd saved for. She was quieter than usual, pensive. We ate, and the silence felt heavy, not the comfortable kind. Finally, she put her fork down. "Liam," she began, her voice careful. "Janice from the book club. Her son, Michael, you remember him? He's just been made a vice president at his firm." I nodded, taking a bite of garlic bread. "That's great for him." And I meant it. I had nothing against Michael. "He's only 32, she added, a pointed note in her voice. "He wears a suit to work. He has a 401k. I chuckled. "Grandma, I have a 401k. I just also have steel-toed boots." She didn't smile. "It's just, I look at you, covered in scrapes and burns, coming home exhausted. Is this it?" Is this the life you envisioned for yourself? This grunt work? The word hit me like a physical blow. Grunt work. It was so foreign coming from her, so opposite to everything she'd ever said to me. It's not grunt work, Grandma, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. It's a skilled trade. I'm building this city. I know, she said, waving a dismissive hand. But where is the future in it? Where is the ambition? It feels like you're just wasting your potential, wasting your life, wasting my life. The words echoed in the cozy kitchen, sucking all the air out of the room. I felt like I'd been kicked in the chest. This wasn't my mom talking. This was my anchor, my believer. I didn't know what to say. How could I argue against a judgment that felt so fundamentally wrong? The foundation of our relationship, which I thought was solid granite, suddenly felt like sand. I left early that night, the uneaten lasagna sitting between us like a monument to the conversation. She gave me a stiff hug at the door. As I walked to my truck, I looked back. She was standing in the window, watching me go, her expression unreadable. There was a distance in her eyes I'd never seen before, a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. It was just a small moment, a disagreement. But as I drove away, the ghost of her words, wasting your life, rattled around in my head. I had no idea that chill was just the beginning of the winter that was coming for me. The chill never left. Our Sunday dinners became strained, polite affairs. The easy laughter was gone, replaced by conversations about the weather, about her garden, about anything that wasn't my future. I tried to show her my pay stubs once, the hefty overtime numbers circled in red. She just glanced at them and said, "Money isn't the same as stature, Liam." It was like talking to a stranger who wore my grandmother's face. And then the first medical bill came. It was tucked, almost hidden, under a pile of grocery store flyers on her counter. "Grandma, what's this?" She snatched it from my hand, her face flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and defiance. "It's nothing, a mix-up with the insurance. I have it handled." But she didn't. A week later, I found another one. And another. I started digging carefully when she was napping. A whole drawer in her desk was a graveyard of envelopes, bills for tests, for specialists, for medications. Thousands and thousands of dollars. Her handling it was letting them pile up, a silent, terrifying avalanche of debt. I confronted her. "Grandma, this is serious. You need help." Her pride was a fortress wall. "I do not need your help, Liam. I am not a charity case. I will manage." Her eyes, hard and scared, met mine. "This is my problem. You focus on your welding." She said welding the way another person might say garbage collecting. Word was now a weapon she used to keep me at a distance. So I went to war for her in silence. What else could I do? I couldn't fight her pride head on. It would only break her. I had to go around it. I became a ghost in her financial machine. I called every single one of her providers. I spent hours on hold, was transferred through countless departments. I learned the language of medical billing CPT codes, explanation of benefits, co-pays, and deductibles. I set up a new, separate bank account. I changed the billing addresses on all her accounts to a P.O. box I'd rented. I became Liam Jones, her authorized representative on the phone. To the world, I was a faceless, helpful voice. To her, I was just her grandson who showed up for lasagna. I lived on rice and beans. I canceled the vacation I'd been planning. I worked every hour of overtime I could get. My social life vanished. My own savings account bled out, transfused directly into the gaping wound of her illness. But every time I saw a balance $0 on a statement, it felt like a victory. I was building something for her, a secret foundation, to keep her world from collapsing. It was the most important weld of my life, and she would never know. This went on for 2 years. 2 years of silent sacrifice, of my own life being put completely on hold. I was tired, stretched thin, but sustained by the love I had for her, a love she seemed to have forgotten she had for me. The crash came on a bright Tuesday afternoon. I was at her house, fixing a leaky faucet, one of the few things she still let me help with. The doorbell rang. It was a man in a cheap suit, holding a thick, legal-looking envelope. He asked for Eleanor Ilara. I just knew. I took the envelope from him, my hands numb. It was from her lawyer, Franklin Moss. I didn't open it. I just carried it to her, my heart a dead weight in my chest. She was in her studio, but she wasn't painting. She was just staring out the window. She took the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't open it either. She just looked at me, and her eyes, God, her eyes were full of a sad, final resolve. "Liam," she said, her voice quiet. "We need to talk." We sat in the living room on the stiff, formal furniture we never used. The envelope lay between us on the coffee table. "I'm updating my will," she said, not meeting my gaze. "I've given it a great deal of thought. I need to ensure my legacy, what little there is in the right hands." "Grandma, what are you talking about? Your legacy is your art. It's me." She shook her head, a slow, painful movement. "No, Liam. A legacy requires stability, foresight. It can't be left to someone who lives hand to mouth with no plan for the future." The air left my lungs. "Hand to mouth? Grandma, I'm doing fine. I'm saving. Enough," she snapped, her voice cracking. "I am tired of the excuses. I am tired of watching you throw your life away on a dead-end job while young men like Michael Janus are building empires. I will not have my life's work, this house, my art, frittered away to support a welder's whims." Every word was a nail in the coffin of our relationship. I sat there, paralyzed, as she laid out her final judgment. She was leaving everything, the house, her savings, the priceless collection of her own art, to the local art museum. A meaningful contribution to culture, she called it. "I'm doing this for you, Liam," she said, and the profound hypocrisy of that statement almost made me vomit. "Maybe this will be the shock you need to finally grow up, to make something of yourself." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. The pain was too deep for that. It was a nuclear silence, vaporizing every happy memory, every lesson, every moment of love. She had looked at my life, at the secret, desperate struggle I was engaged in for her, and she had seen only failure. She saw a wasted life. I stood up. The world felt tilted. I looked at this woman, my anchor, my hero, and I saw a stranger blinded by her own misguided pride and disappointment. "Okay," I said, my voice a hollow echo. "If that's what you think of me." I walked out of her house. I didn't look back at the studio, at the garden, at the life we had shared. I got into my truck and drove. I drove for hours, until the city lights were gone and there was only the blackness of the country night. I had lost her. I had lost everything. And the cruelest joke of all was that she had no idea she'd been destroying me with the very money I was using to try and save her. I pulled over on a deserted gravel road, the silence of the fields pressing in on me. And in that silence, a new feeling began to burn through the numbness. It wasn't rage. It was colder, harder. A resolve forged in the fires of absolute betrayal. One day I thought, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. One day she'll look at me. One day she'll see exactly who I've become, and she will understand the weight of what she threw away. 5 years. It took 5 years to build the man she said I could never be. I moved to the other side of the country. I took a job on an oil rig, not for the money, but for the annihilation. The brutal physical labor, the howling wind, and the crashing waves, it matched the storm inside me. Out there on that metal island in the freezing sea, I could scream, and no one would hear. I could bleed, and the salt spray would just wash it away. I saved every penny. The money that wasn't going to her secret medical fund, a habit I couldn't break, a promise I'd made to a ghost I invested. I studied structural engineering at night on a battered laptop, the glow of the screen my only light. I wasn't just a welder anymore. I was an engineer, a problem solver. I designed a new coupling system for underwater pipelines, patented it, and sold the patent for a sum of money so large it felt fictional. The boy who drove away in a beat-up truck was gone. In his place was a man named Liam Thorne, founder and CEO of Aegis Structures. We specialized in the impossible, reinforcing, rebuilding, saving things everyone else thought were doomed. We were the best, and we were expensive. I never contacted her. But I had a private investigator send me a yearly report, just a few pages. Her health was stable, thanks to the consistent payments from the anonymous trust fund I maintained. The Ilara Fund. She lived in her house, surrounded by her art, believing her legacy was secure. Believing I was still a failure somewhere. The PI's last report included a flyer. The Maple Grove Art Museum was hosting a gala, a celebration of legacy, honoring its major donors. At the top of the list was the estate of Eleanor Ilara. My grandmother was posthumously donating her life's work, and the museum was throwing her a party. It was time. I flew back first class. The city ID, built as a young man, looked different from the window of a chauffeured town car. I checked into the penthouse suite of the best hotel. I looked in the mirror. The man staring back was tailored, calm, and powerful. The scars on his hands from hot slag and sharp steel were the only hint of the life he'd lived. They were my medals of honor. The gala was everything I expected. Soft lighting, the clink of champagne flutes, the low murmur of cultured voices. The air smelled of perfume and money. And there, in a place of honor, was a collection of my grandmother's paintings, her soul hanging on a museum wall for strangers to admire. I moved through the crowd, a shark in a sea of guppies. I saw him immediately, Franklin Moss, her lawyer, older, grayer, but with the same unctuous, self-satisfied air. He was talking to the museum director, a woman with a bright, fundraising smile. I waited. I sipped my water. I was in no rush. Finally, he broke away, heading for the bar. I fell into step beside him. "Franklin Moss," I said, my voice even. He turned, his eyes scanning me, cataloging the suit, the watch, the aura of wealth. He didn't recognize me. "Yes? Have we met?" "Not formally." Liam Thorne. The name meant nothing to him. He gave a professional, vacant smile. "A pleasure, Mr. Thorne. Are you enjoying the event?" "It's enlightening," I said. I'm a great admirer of Elara's work, a true visionary. Ah, yes, he said, warming up. A tragic loss, but such a generous, forward-thinking final gesture. She wanted her art to inspire generations. Her final gesture, I repeated slowly, the will you helped her execute, the one that disinherited her grandson. His smile faltered. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. That was a private family matter, a difficult decision for Eleanor. She felt it was for the best. For the best, I mused, taking a sip of water. To cut him off without a cent. To call his life's work grunt work. Tell me, Mr. Moss, did she ever mention that her grandson was paying for her cardiologist? Her medication? The very treatments that kept her alive long enough to disinherit him? Moss went very still. The color drained from his face. I have no idea what you're talking about. Of course you don't, I said, my voice dropping to a confidential murmur. The statements went to a P.O. box. The name on the account was the Elara Fund. She never knew. She died thinking he was a failure while he was literally funding her heartbeat. I let that hang in the air between us. I watched the horror dawn in his eyes as the pieces clicked into place, the moral catastrophe of it. Who are you? He whispered, his voice shaky. I leaned in close, finally letting him see the boy in the man's eyes. I'm the welder. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, morally shattered. It was the first brick, and it had been laid with perfect, silent precision. The museum director found me minutes later, her smile now strained. Mr. Thorne? Franklin said you might have some questions about the collection. I do, I said, giving her a warm, charming smile. I'm considering a significant donation to the museum, a naming rights level donation, but I'd like to discuss the provenance of the Elara collection first. In private, her eyes widened. Of course, right this way, Mr. Thorne. She led me towards her private office. As we walked, I caught a glimpse of my grandmother's most famous painting, the one of the light holding the tree, hanging proudly behind the podium. Soon, I thought, soon everyone in this room will know the truth. They will see the real legacy, not the art on the walls, but the silent, costly love that made it possible. The hook was set. The stage was set. The ghost had returned, and he was ready to speak. The museum director, a woman named Beatrice, sat across from me in her plush office, her hands clasped tightly on her desk. The gala continued as a dull hum beyond the door. Now, Mr. Thorne, she began, her voice a careful blend of curiosity and greed. You mentioned a donation and some questions about the Elara collection? I leaned back in my chair, the picture of relaxed confidence. The donation is conditional, Beatrice. May I call you Beatrice? It hinges on the story behind these paintings. I'm not sure I understand. It's the work of the late Eleanor Elara, a generous bequest from her estate. An estate managed by Franklin Moss, I stated. Did he ever tell you about her grandson? She shifted uncomfortably. He mentioned there was one, that he was. Not a part of her final wishes. A polite way of saying she cut him out completely, I said. She told him he was wasting his life, that his work as a welder was beneath the family's dignity. Beatrice gave a weak, sympathetic smile. Family dynamics can be so complicated. Indeed. I opened the slim leather portfolio I'd brought with me. I slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was a bank statement for the Elara Fund from 5 years ago. The transactions were a heartbreaking chronicle, payment after payment to Maple Grove Cardiology, Oncology, a dozen specialists, thousands upon thousands of dollars. "This," I said softly, "is the Elara Fund, an anonymous trust that paid for every single one of Eleanor S. medical treatments for the last 2 years of her life. The bills her insurance wouldn't cover. The treatments that allowed her to live long enough to finish her final series of paintings. The series you now have hanging on your walls." Beatrice's eyes scanned the document. Her professional composure began to crack. I don't. Who? I slid another document across the table. It was a notarized affidavit from the bank manager, confirming the source of the funds for the Elara Fund was an account belonging to one Liam Thorne. "Liam Thorne," I said. "That's me." But my grandmother knew me as Liam, her grandson. The welder. The blood drained from Beatrice's face. She looked from the documents to me, her mind racing, connecting the monstrous dots. You paid for all of this?" While she told me I was wasting my life, I finished for her, my voice still calm, devoid of anger. It was just the truth, finally breathing in the open. She died believing I was a failure, while the money I earned with these hands, I held them up. The scars clear in the office's light was the only thing keeping her alive. Her legacy was built on a foundation of my labor and my silence. Beatrice looked like she might be sick. "Oh my God, this is horrific. Poetic, isn't it?" I said, a small, sad smile touching my lips. She valued the art, the appearance of success, the stature of a man in a suit. She never valued the sweat, the sacrifice, the silent, building love that actually holds the world together. I stood up, looking down at the pale, shaken woman. "So here are my conditions, Beatrice. The donation is withdrawn. Furthermore, you will immediately add a permanent plaque next to her collection. It will read, 'The art of Eleanor Elara was made possible through the silent sacrifice of her grandson, Liam, whose hands built more than she could ever see.' You will read that statement verbatim at the podium tonight when you accept her generous bequest." She stared at me, utterly defeated. "And if I refuse?" "Then I will hold a press conference tomorrow morning," I said, gathering my portfolio. "I will show every journalist in this city these documents. I will tell them the story of how the Maple Grove Art Museum glorifies a legacy built on a cruel and tragic lie. Your celebration of legacy will become a memorial for hypocrisy. Your donors will flee. Your reputation will be ash." There was no fight left in her. The truth was too powerful, too damning. She simply nodded, her eyes wide with shock. I left her office and walked back into the gala. The speeches were beginning. Franklin Moss was nowhere to be seen. I stood at the back of the crowd, a silent observer. Beatrice took the podium. Her voice was unsteady at first, then grew stronger, fueled by a righteous fury, not at me, but at the lie she had nearly enshrined. She spoke about Eleanor Elara's talent, and then she paused, looked down at the note I'd given her, and back at the crowd. "But a legacy is more than art on a wall," she said, her voice ringing through the silent room. "It is also the truth. And the truth is, this collection, the final years of Eleanor Elara's life, were made possible by a silent, selfless sacrifice." She read the plaque wording I had demanded. You could have heard a pin drop. Then a wave of shocked, murmuring whispers swept through the room. I saw people turning, their eyes eventually finding me at the back. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just met their gazes one by one until they looked away, ashamed for a woman they never knew and a story they never understood. Justice wasn't getting the house or the paintings. Justice was the truth. It was the shattering of my grandmother's carefully constructed, prideful narrative. It was the world finally seeing the invisible welds that had held her world together. I walked out of the museum into the cool night air. The weight I had carried for 7 years was gone. In its place was a quiet, profound sorrow. I hadn't wanted to destroy her memory. I had only wanted to complete it, to add the missing piece, the foundation. I never went back to that town. The house, the paintings, let the museum have them. They were never my legacy. My legacy was the company I built. It was the knowledge that I had loved someone enough to bleed for them in secret. It was the man I had become, not in spite of her betrayal, but because of it. I learned that sometimes the strongest structures are the ones no one sees. The foundations buried deep in the earth, bearing immense weight without any credit. And I learned that love doesn't always look like approval. Sometimes it looks like a silent, endless series of bank transfers. Sometimes it looks like walking away so someone can keep their pride, even if it breaks your heart. And sometimes justice doesn't scream, it doesn't rage. It just stands in a quiet room and finally tells the truth. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's justice finding its voice.